Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Author Shelby Steele is the Robert J. and Marion E. Oster Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, where he studies race relations, multiculturalism, and affirmative action. Shelby's most recent book, published before November 4th, is entitled A Bound Man: Why We Are Excited About Barack Obama and Why He Can't Win. Shelby and I discussed this book earlier in the year. Needless to say, we have reason to discuss it again now. Segment 1 about that subtitle.
Now you've established my credentials as a prognosticator.
Why he can't win. Shelby, more than 64 million Americans voted for Barack Obama. He is now the 44th president-elect of the United States. Why did you expect him to lose? I want to lay out the argument of the book in a moment, but give me one sentence, if you can, on why you thought he couldn't win.
I thought he couldn't win. By the way, I didn't really argue inside the book that he wouldn't win, but I thought that he would have a difficult time winning because he never really revealed who he was, and I felt that the American people finally would want to know something about who he really was before they elevated him to the presidency.
All right. Let's go to the argument. In my judgment, the quick way of getting to the basic argument of the book is a tale of two trumpeters. Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis. Give us Louis Armstrong and why he's significant to your argument and to our understanding of the president-elect.
He's what I call a bargainer. When minorities enter the mainstream from which they have always historically been alienated, they wear a mask because they're at a natural disadvantage, and they try to present themselves in a way that angles for some advantage or other that allows them to succeed. So Louis Armstrong is a sort of classic example. Here's a poor kid from Louisiana, no father, so forth, but he has a certain genius in music. Genius is the word. Genius is the word. He transformed American music almost single-handedly. Well, what do? Do you stay behind the walls of segregation, or do you move out into the world? The world he met was a segregated world that did not want to give him any chance to do anything. He developed what I call the bargainer's mask, in which he basically, in his day, when segregation prevailed, he would stand before these all-white crowds at hotels where he could not himself stay, and he would bow a little bit, and he'd have a kind of exaggerated grin, and he'd put on this sort of humble mask, in effect making to them a kind of offer of inferiority, of saying, in a sense, if I'm not going to challenge you in any way, and in fact I'm going to offer you an image of black inferiority that goes along with your prejudice, if you will let me play my music. And
so Louis Armstrong, I think back to those old black and white, his appearances in those old movies in the 30s, and Louis Armstrong is implicitly saying, I know my place and I'm happy in it. Now that we've got that out of the way, listen to my music.
Right. He knew that he's
not necessarily telling the truth that he's happy in.
No, he's
that's
not.
What he's saying,
that's right.
So that he can get on to the question of his music.
That's right. That was his mask, and his mask. What made that bargain with whites? I'm not going to challenge you in your prejudice.
All right.
If you will, and America loved him. And bargainers are always loved.
He does get something in return for it.
He gets something in return. He got to become Louis Armstrong, and a well-loved figure in American life.
Miles Davis.
Well, history caught up with Louis Armstrong, and we after World War II and the rumblings of the Civil Rights Movement, America had changed, and so Miles Davis had exactly the opposite mask of Louis Armstrong. He came out on stage. He wouldn't speak to his audience. He would very often turn his back on his audience. If somebody spoke to him, he would glare at them with contempt, or he'd curse them out. And he knew that in the sophisticated world of New York jazz and so forth, he was dealing with whites who admired, who were proud to be in an audience. And as I say, I know people today who brag about being cursed out by Miles Davis. But again, the same sort of thing. I'm going to show you contempt for. I'm going to show contempt for that, and white liberals, particularly, who supported him as an artist, not just as a performer, but as an artist, had the feeling then that they were themselves above racism, and they were beyond it, because, after all, I'm a Miles Davis fan.
Louis Armstrong typifies the bargainer. Miles Davis, the challenger. Where's Barack Obama fit?
Barack Obama is an absolute, to the manner born bargainer, who basically says, who takes the anxiety out of being white, who says to whites, I am not going to prejudge you as a racist if you will not hold my race against me. And whites are so thankful for that bargain, because white Americans today, as in the last 40 years since the civil rights victory, have been stigmatized as racist, have had to defend themselves, prove the negative, that they're not racist. Here comes a black who says, I'm going to take you off the hook. I'm not going to presume you're
racist. So, Shelby, you argued when we sat down some months ago, when it seemed, frankly, as I recall, at that point, it was unlikely he'd win the primary, let alone the election. You had a strong form of the argument. Now that he's the president-elect, I want to see if you wish to stick with that. And you can correct me, but I believe I'm paraphrasing that argument correctly. That Barack Obama, the candidacy of Barack Obama, was not particularly about politics, the future of the country. It was about race, and above all, about making white folks feel good about what they had accomplished in the recent decades. You want to stick with that statement?
Absolutely, I stick with it. The only difference in my sort of feeling about these things today is that I underestimated. I wrote a book on white guilt, and I talk about the need in this book, the need of
this book abound man.
Yes, of white Americans to, because here's the thing: white America has made tremendous moral progress since the 60s, and I grew up in segregation. I know the difference. It is.
There is something worth celebrating,
and they've never given them. The white has never given themselves credit for that, and here is an opportunity at last to document this progress.
Right. We've got segment 2, the content of his character. 2 quotations from Shelby Steele, and I'd ask you to explain each one very briefly. Quotation 1, this is you. Obama's special charisma always came from the racial idealism he embodied. In fact, this was his only true political originality.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely stand by that. He was a cultural candidate.
Quotation 2, the golden rule of bargainers, you've already said that he was a prototypical bargainer, is never to say what you really think.
Right.
Okay. Now you put those 2 arguments together, or those 2 quotations together, and what you've got here is the Shelby Steele argument that he appealed to voters because of the color of his skin, while deeply submerging the actual content of his character. And it would seem to me that a likely conclusion from that argument is that we have just elected a man about whose own inner self and character we know less than we knew about any other modern president. Will you go for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I entirely stand by that. I think we still don't know the man. I think it's going to be difficult once he's actually governing the country and having to make decisions every single day. He is going to reveal himself. There's no way not to. But that's the first time we're going to get to really know who Barack Obama is.
I'm giving you every chance to say, well, maybe I was a little hard on him.
No.
You will not take back a bit of it.
No,
By the way, can I just, how did you feel on, I know because we know each other. Frankly, you told us here when you were on this show last time that you intended to vote for John McCain. You did not vote for Barack Obama.
Absolutely not, no.
How did it feel to watch that man get elected?
It hurt.
It did.
It hurt. He stands for things that, he stands for nothing that I stand for. His economic policies are, one of the distinctions I make is that he was elected really as a cultural symbol rather than as a politician. Politically, if you look at his actual positions on things, I, as a conservative, don't agree with much of
Okay.
with much of anything. But to me, the mistake America made, pretty brazen comment, I guess, is to vote for him on a cultural level, on the level of cultural symbolism, rather than on his politics.
Here to me is one of the great puzzles, which you touch on in A Bound Man. Barack Obama is raised by his white mother, and then after she dies in early death, by his white grandparents in Hawaii in a white world. He graduates from Columbia. He becomes president of Law Review at Harvard Law School. The world of conventional and compelling white success is open before him.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes back to Chicago, becomes a community organizer on the South Side, attends Jeremiah Wright's, I don't know if it's fair to call it a black nationalist church, but
fair.
That's fair. He attends a black nationalist church. In other words, Barack Obama, he has a black father and a white mother. He makes it very, very far in a world that I think is culturally white. These are crude terms. There's a sense in which he chooses in his 20s to become black. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair way to put it?
Absolutely.
And why does he make that? What's going on there?
He was raised in an era of identity politics, where the most important thing in the world was to, for anybody who was black, was to establish their credentials, their bona fides as a black, and he had so many strikes against him, coming from an interracial background, where people could look him in the eye and say, "You're not really black," or and could always have that vulnerability over his head, and so his need to be black became much more obsessive in many ways than somebody else's might have come. And again, he came of age in an era where identity was everything. You had to be. Your authenticity as a human being required that you be strictly and narrowly identified with the racial politics of blackness. And so you see in his career all these opportunities, as you say, in the white world. Then he goes back and becomes a community organizer, but then he goes to Harvard, and then there's this zigzagging in his life, back and forth between the two worlds.
Now, you grew up in circumstances that were kind of a mirror image, that, as I recall, your mom was white, your dad was black, but you were raised in the entirely black community, right? Nevertheless, you'd have a feel, I suppose, for, as you can tell, you're talking to a white bread, white guy. So I'm poking around here because I don't understand some of this. How about if I put the question to you this way? Based on your experience and your own experience and your close reading of Barack Obama, give us one or two items about his inner character that you think we're going to be finding out that he hasn't yet revealed, that he's kept under the mask.
Well, I don't know if I can do it that quickly, but one of the problems in being in that situation is that you are told the vulnerability is that you're not authentic. You're not. When I was a kid, you could get up, and I grew up in a segregated world. So in the morning, a black could say to me, "You're not really black." In the afternoon, they could say, "You're you know what, just like the rest of us." So you were held on that sort of a tether. That breeds in an insecurity. When I came of age, I fellow traveled with black nationalism, did my 3 years just like he did his community organizing. I went to East St. Louis and worked in Great Society programs for 3 years. Same sort. Now have I resolved it? No, you never resolve it. What made the difference for me is that at a certain point, I just said basically, screw you. I'm going to be my own man. And if it suits you, then that's fine. If it doesn't, then that's also fine. I am proud to be black, but I'll determine what the meaning of that is. And so I sort of had that kind of a moment in my life early on. And one of the scary things for me is that I don't think he has, or if he has, then he hasn't. 20 years in Reverend Wright's church, a church his own mother could not go to. You know, the first day it would have occurred to me that my mother couldn't come here. Now, what does that mean? What am I doing here? And so the problem for kids like that, and kids like myself, is that you can get seduced into self-betrayal as a form of getting along with people, of accommodating people. One of the things that troubles me about Obama's character is that he can get along with anybody. Is that he can articulate a conservative point of view better than many conservatives can. He can be as strikingly far left, and the problem is not so much that he's going to reveal who he really is. The problem is that he may not be anybody. He may not have strong convictions and passions.
Segment 3, race relations during the Obama administration. Shelby Steele, quote, "It is not hard to see why Reverend Jackson might have experienced Mr. Obama's emergence as something of a stiletto to the heart. Mr. Obama is so successful at winning gratitude from whites precisely because Mr. Jackson was so successful at inflaming and exploiting white guilt." Explain that.
Jackson is what I call a challenger who says to whites, I will never let you off the hook. I'm going to presume you are a racist until you give me something, and then I'll offer absolution of some kind. But you have to buy your innocence. Bargainers like Obama grant innocence. And that's why they're so well loved. Jackson is saying you have to prove your innocence to me. So Jackson could never go far. Challengers could never be successful broadly in American politics because whites secretly, quietly can't stand them. Can't stand because they have this leverage, this moral authority over them, and they keep using it. Whereas Obama is saying, I'm not ever going to use it. You can trust that I'm not going to play the race card.
Quoting you once again, "I don't think whites really want change from Obama as much as they want documentation of change that has already occurred."
Yes, I think that's the interesting phenomenon in this election is the hunger for in white America to prove to document this moral progress that white America has made over the last 40 years.
The change we can believe in has already taken place.
The change is already here. If it wasn't here, Obama wouldn't be elected. He's not going to introduce change. He's going to document change that's already here. And I already hear people now that he is elected saying that Jackson and Sharpton and so forth are anachronisms.
All right. So white people, in the very act of electing him, got what they wanted. In their deepest selves, they think they got what they wanted.
That's the illusion.
Now, African Americans in this election turn out in historic proportions and vote for him. I haven't seen final and utterly reliable polling data, but it's clearly by more than 95%.
Yeah,
it is a huge, monolithic turnout. What do black people want from this man?
Both groups, whites and blacks, their real investment in Barack Obama was that he was an opportunity to dispel the stigma that whites have been stigmatized as racist. So, well, if I vote for Obama and he becomes the president, then I'm not a racist and this is not a racist country. The stigma that blacks have lived under is that we're inferior. And so now, if we vote for Obama, if Obama gets to be the president of the United States, he's the paramount, most powerful man on the planet. How can we be inferior? It puts the lie to that stigma. So both groups had that. I think that was their deepest investment in his presidency, and it was a very powerful force.
Let me quote you once again, but there is an inherent contradiction in all this. When whites, especially today's younger generation, proudly support Obama for his post-racialism, they unwittingly embrace race as their primary motivation, close quote. That is actually a beautifully written, elegant sentence, but it is an introduction to a nightmare, because what it suggests is that in this wonderful moment when we think we've finally put race behind us, we're mired in it more deeply than we were the day before.
Yeah, it's an absolute, there's pathos there. But everywhere I went on my book tour and with regard to this book, and young people would come up, we're beyond your generation. We're going to vote for Obama and so forth. And don't you think that we grew up differently than you did? And no, you didn't. You did not. You are now obsessed with race. Race is the only thing that's driving your interest in Barack Obama. You couldn't even tell me what his policies are. You're never critical of him in any way. If you were free of race, you would not judge him culturally. You would judge him politically. You'd look at his position on Social Security, on all these mundane boilerplate issues that presidents actually have to deal with, his economic policies, and you'd say you like them. You never want to see that. You are consumed by race. And that's the I don't know if tragedy is the word, but it certainly is an irony.
And for African Americans, exactly the same thing applies?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you were free of race, then it wouldn't be a 95, 96, 97% black support for Barack Obama. You would be. What's interesting is that, at the very beginning, blacks were not for Barack Obama.
That's right. You make the point that in Iowa, he didn't. What made him was Iowa, which is a white state.
He had to win the white vote in order to convince blacks to then invest in him, and then to emotionally invest that this is a guy who can prove we're not inferior. But
the
before
white validation had to
the
take
white
place
validation, whites had to buy into Barack Obama before blacks would buy into Biden. Another chilling irony, ugly irony.
Barack Obama on affirmative action, quote, "I still believe in affirmative action as a means of overcoming both historic and potentially current discrimination, but I think that it can't be a quota system and that it can't be something that is simply applied without looking at the whole person, whether that person is black or white or Hispanic or male or female." Close quote. Mm-hmm. Does he entrench affirmative action more deeply or begin to scale it back?
I think he's going to probably entrench it more deeply. He feels now politically he owes it to blacks who came out in such vast numbers for him. He's a Chicago politician. You pay off your political debts, and so my guess is we're going to have affirmative action, race-based, not class-based, but race-based affirmative action for a long, long time.
All right. Segment 4. A Bound Man, about Barack Obama. What just happened on November 4th? And now I'm edging away from race to the political culture of the United States. Mm-hmm. Two quotations. One's from you and one's from Tom Sowell, your friend, our friend. Shelby Steele, quote, "On the level of policy, Obama was quite unremarkable. His economics were the redistributive axioms of old-fashioned Keynesianism. His social thought was a recycled great society," close quote. This guy's thinking, policy thinking, is at best 40 years out of date. Right. Tom Sowell, quote, "This man has been a far-left ideologue for 20 years," close quote. Yeah. Is Barack Obama a tweaker of the status quo, just a stale old Democrat in policy terms, or is he a hard left ideologue?
I don't think.
And how on earth can you and Tom Sowell look at the same man and draw such different conclusions?
I don't think of him. Well, it is. Let me put it this way: he is certainly going to try to be more than a tweaker of the status quo. He's going to come in with economic policies that are Keynesian. He's going to raise taxes on all sorts of people, on capital gains and corporations, and he's going to spend money on great society style social. He's going to take us sort of backward to that era. He's not going to speak ideologically. You're never going to see the ideological fire in his eyes, but he is going to definitely try to take the country back in that direction. There's no doubt about that.
All right. Let me give you a longish quotation from Mark Stein, but it's a quotation like everything from Mark Stein that really delivers, and I want to see if this makes sense to you. Quote, "The president-elect's so-called tax cut excuse me, will absolve 48% of Americans from paying any federal tax at all. Just under half the population will be on the dole. By 2012, it'll be more than half. This will be an electorate with the majority will be able to vote itself more lollipops from the minority still dumb enough to prioritize self-reliance, dynamism, and innovation over the cocoon of the nanny state. That is the death of the American idea." Close quote. Mark Stein is arguing that while we're all obsessed with the cultural and racial significance of this new president. Precisely what you talk about, the old-fashioned, great society, incrementalism, government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We're at a tipping point, and
Right.
Barack Obama is likely to take us
Right.
past it.
But you know what's interesting to me about that? No white candidate in America could have won an election based on those policies. It had to be a black, it had to be somebody who could bring to bear on this old-fashioned socialistic point of view the moral authority of race, the moral authority of being black. That's the insidious and interesting thing to me. No white man could, John Edwards could never win an election based on policies like that. That I'm going to raise taxes. You're running and you win on a
So
on a
his
program.
special appeal to liberals is that everything old is new again.
The price America is paying for its racial history is this reversion. Is that we've. And I've had friends, liberal friends, say, well, it took me a little while, but I said, okay, maybe I should pay more taxes. If I'm going to get a black man in the White House, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll pay the price. That's what happened, and we are going to pay the price now. We are going to pay the price because that same racial moral authority is going to be his greatest weapon as a president. Who's going to want to stand in his way and block all of these beneficent things that he wants to do, this redistribution of the wealth to people who've been locked out. It's always going to work for him.
Let me try another longish quotation.
Because whites are still motivated by race, the dummies.
Okay.
There's painful ironies, because I grew up in segregation. Let me one little point. I grew up in segregation. Oh God, I'd pray for some white liberals. Where are these people? You know, then the same people now whose attention I couldn't get then now are voting for Obama. It's
okay. My embryonic political movement is Shelby for president. Okay, another longish quotation makes a different point, makes it in a very compelling way, and I think delivers. I want to put this on the table and see how you respond, so it's worth a longish quotation. This is from Peter Hitchens, not Christopher Hitchens.
His brother.
His brother Peter, who disagrees with him on everything, but writes with the same rat-a-tat-tat irresistibility. Quote, I was in Washington, D.C. the night of the election. There had been a few white people blowing car horns and shouting as the result became clear, that is, as Obama's victory becomes clear. But among the Mexicans, Salvadorans, and other third world nationalities, there was something like ecstasy. They grasped the real significance of this moment. They knew it meant that America had finally switched sides in a global cultural war. Suspicious of welfare addiction, totally committed to preserving its own sovereignty, unabashedly Christian in a world part secular and part Muslim, the United States was unique. Now the U.S., like Britain before it, has begun the long, slow descent. Where now is our last best hope of earth? Close quote. Now, I think it'd be pretty easy to deride that as a racist, or as the English might put it, racialist comment, but it's not really. He's making a cultural argument, right?
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's saying...
Sound? Is there something to it? How do you respond?
No, I think there's definitely... there is definitely something to it. What he's saying is that, in one sort of senses this, that in the election of Obama, so if a black like Colin Powell had been elected president,
right,
nothing would change much. He is at the very least a centrist right sort of figure who's not going to. But Obama really does want. He likes identity politics. He really does want to use his moral authority as a black to usher America into a new kind of an era, of a new kind of age, and white Americans have now, I guess, pretty much, at least for the moment, so I think this may change, but for the moment they've signed on to that, and because with the race also comes the cultural change, also comes the assault on classic American values like hard work and merit and fairness and so forth, rather than government interventionism and so forth. Obama's going to use his racial moral authority to take us in that direction. So I would.
There's something there.
There is something there. It's a bit scary.
Segment 5, the politics. We're talking about a bound man. why we are excited about Obama and why he can't win. The paperback to be entitled Why He Was Bound to Win?
Yeah, how he won.
Okay. All right. You've been talking about the way his moral authority as a black man is irresistible. Mm-hmm. Let me read to you an exchange that popped up in Christopher Buckley's new column in the Financial Times. It was a Q&A. He was taking questions from readers. A reader, quote, "It's clear to me that the current GOP, the Republican Party as it now stands, the current GOP has dissolved into the angry white people's party, much like the old National Party of South Africa." Close quote. Christopher Buckley, quote, "An interesting comparison," close quote. Mm-hmm. Now that Christopher Buckley can let that premise stand and slip by suggests to me that the Republican Party is on the defensive in the most profound
Huge
manner
way.
of my entire lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does the Republican Party grapple with this new man and the cultural phenomenon he has spawned? It is, by the way, overwhelmingly a white party.
That's right.
If John McCain received a majority of white votes, there is that racial element in the result.
That's right. What happened is the whites in general were stigmatized as racist. Liberals have now, by going with Obama and so forth, feel at least, their illusion is that they've gotten some leverage of their own and they've escaped that stigma. The stigmatization of whites now is focused like a beam on the Republican Party and on conservatism as a point of view in the world. This is now the sort of a racist, by definition, by default, really. This is where racism now is located, and we can all see it over there, and we can isolate it, and it's in those red states in the South and in the Southwest and so forth. And it is going to be a difficult struggle for the Republican Party, and they may end up betraying. And what I fear is that they will end up betraying what is good about them, which is those values of fairness and merit and so forth, in order to play the game, to get back in the game. That's how societies do begin to decline, because when you trade away those values, then the whole thing weakens.
Shelby Steele, quote, "The black illegitimacy rate remains at 70%. Blacks did worse on the SAT in 2000 than in 1990. 55% of all federal prisoners are black. The academic achievement gap between blacks and whites persists even for the black middle class. All this will continue despite the level of melanin in the president's skin," close quote. And that's a horrifying set of statistics, but it's all true. Here's the question. Is there a Nixon to China opportunity here? That is to say, are there going to be things that Barack Obama can do of which people like Shelby Steele and I would approve because he's African American? Is he somehow going to be able to talk with new moral authority about the importance of education, about the importance of intact families? Do you see openings that he could pursue, and do you think he will?
Oh, I think yes to both questions. I think he already has certainly talked a little about responsibility, black fathers being more responsible. I give him credit for that. I think that's good. It's certainly not the first time. That's not a new idea for black America. You know, Bill Cosby is the sort of most recent casualty to that.
But exactly, he paid a price.
He paid a price, and so Obama is going to he's going to utter it because, you see, it helps him bargain with whites, and so he's going to utter it. But is he going to really? What disturbs me is then he turns around and stands for, will advocate social policies that don't ask for responsibility, that in fact blunt the incentive, and that's what bothers. So yes, he'll give some lip service to it, but that's about it.
But his efforts to address the various pathologies of the underclass will be lip service.
Will be lip service, right? As I say there in one of those sentences somewhere, and this was, I think, again, from my experience in the Great Society programs, and so, people don't change because the government intervenes with a social program and so forth. It just never happens. They change when they become exhausted with their suffering. The civil rights movement is the greatest example of reform certainly in my lifetime. It happened when people said, "That's it. Kill us if you want, but we're not going to live a segregated life anymore. We're exhausted with this. Enough." And then change happens. They didn't care who the president was. They had no social government. The government did, no social programs from the government. The government did not support this in any way. In fact, tried to repress it. Nothing could stop it. When Black America determines that it's going to overcome statistics like that, they'll do it.
A century from now, who will be viewed as the more significant figure, Barack Obama or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Martin Luther King Jr.
Without a moment's hesitation.
Without a moment's hesitation. This was a man who again was, as I was just saying, who was leading an exhausted people into freedom, and saying people who were just ordinary people who and it was a movement of real dignity. Mm. One of the biggest problems Black America has, one of the problems why you see the statistics like that, is that we sold out our dignity to the government, who they're going to be the ones who are in the civil rights movement. Again, we had no government support. We did it. We did it on our, and we had our dignity, and it was a magnificent achievement. We have to go after our dignity again. There ought to be that, and if Obama could speak in that language, it would be very helpful. I don't think he will, but it would be helpful.
Final question: the playwright and journalist of 20th century, Claire Booth Luce, used to say that history would give even the most important figures just one sentence. Lincoln freed the slaves, Churchill defeated Hitler, Reagan won the Cold War. Take a guess at Barack Obama's sentence in history.
He's the first Black man in the White House.
And that's it.
That's it.
All right. Shelby Steele, the author of A Bound Man, Why We Are Excited About Barack Obama and Why He Can't Win, to be retitled, I'm sure, in the next edition. Worth reading and rereading. Shelby, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge. Thanks for joining us.